Myths are not stories that are untrue. Rather, they are tales that don't fit neatly into the historical record, which serve as a foundation to a culture. A man lies on the ground. He has lost everything he owned and everything he loved. He's covered in ash and dust, and his body is marred by painful oozing sores. His wife has left him, and he's even lost all of his friends. He is truly at rock bottom. And worst of all, he doesn't understand what has caused all this suffering and misfortune. He cries, he screams, he smashes his fists on the floor. But there is one line he won't cross. Despite the best efforts of some very powerful forces, he will not blame God. One day, God was hanging out up in heaven when a bunch of angels stopped by to say hey. It all seemed pretty cool until Satan stepped out from among them.
Hey, Satan,
God said.
Where have you been?
Oh,
Satan replied.
back and forth across the earth.
Oh, yeah? Oh, cool. So, have you seen my awesome servant Job?
No, what's he like?
He's kind of perfect. He's totally successful and happy and handsome. And he's super dedicated to me. The guy literally never does anything wrong.
But Satan had seen Job. And now hearing how important the guy clearly was to God, he concocted a nefarious plot to mess with him. He pointed out that it was easy for Job to love God when God had given him everything that he could ever want. But Satan was pretty sure that if God took away all of Job's nice things, he'd change his tune pretty quick. God thought about this for a second, and then with faith in his diligent servant, took Satan up on his bet. God would allow Satan to take away everything Job had, as long as he didn't hurt him physically, and in doing so, prove how much Job super loved God. Meanwhile, down on Earth, Job was enjoying a lovely springtime afternoon. His bountiful farmland was full of sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys, and his many servants tended to his livestock and labored in his fields. Every night, his 7 sons and 3 daughters feasted and partied together. And after the festivities, Job would always step away and offer a sacrifice to God on behalf of each of them, just in case any of them had, sinned by mistake. But on this night, as he was finishing his offering, a messenger came in with devastating news. It seemed a party of raiders had attacked and killed all of the oxen, donkeys, and servants in the fields. Then, before that messenger even had a chance to finish talking, a second messenger came in with even more terrible news. Fire had fallen from the heavens and burned all of the sheep and servants who were with them. Before Job could even process this, in came a third messenger telling him that a passing army had swept through the land and stolen all of his camels. And just when Job thought things couldn't get any worse, in strode messenger number 4 with the worst news of all. All of Job's children had been feasting at their oldest brother's home when a mighty wind swept in and collapsed the house on all of them. None of his children survived. Utterly devastated, Job tore at his clothes, shaved his head, and then fell to the ground to beseech God. Meanwhile, Satan, conveniently eavesdropping nearby, was pretty sure that this was the moment that Job was gonna bail on the big guy. And he leaned in close to hear the words. But Job did not. In fact, he only cried out that the Lord gives and also does he take away. And even after all that had happened, he still praised God. Down but not out, Satan headed back up to heaven to find God feeling pretty smug.
You see? Even with everything taken away from him, Job still loves me.
Sure. Job might still be a perfect worshiper, even with his wealth and family taken away. I'll give you that. But if you will allow me to, I don't know, say hurt Job directly, I'm pretty sure he'd fold.
And so God, feeling very confident, agreed to let Satan torture Job. But only if he promised not to kill the guy, okay? Yeah? Pinkies? All right. The second deal was struck. So Satan went back down to earth and immediately afflicted Job with painful bleeding sores all over his body. And as Job laid on the ground in agony, even his own wife told him to forsake God and die to end his suffering. But still, Job would not give in. even though by this point he was struggling hard to understand why this was all happening to him. Though he was determined to trust God, both in good times and bad, even though these times seemed, really, really bad. As Job lay bleeding and alone, 3 of his friends came to visit him. They had heard of all the horrible things that had happened and wanted to spend some time with him and try to cheer him up. But when they first saw him, he was in such an awful state that they could hardly recognize him. So in empathy, they wept, and for 7 days, they simply sat with him in silence and mourning. Finally, Job spoke.
Oh, is this it?
To curse.
Yes, yes.
The day he was born.
Ah!
He still would not blame God for what had happened. Then, with the ice finally broken, his friends began to speak their minds. They said that he must have done something horribly wrong to deserve these things, because they know that God is just, and that the world is ordered by God's justice and fairness. So surely Job must have, somehow, been getting what he deserves, maybe? No, Job knows he is innocent. He's never done anything wrong in his life. But his friends continue to insist this cannot be so. They say that they feel for him, and they'll help him make things right with God. But if Job is suffering, it must be God that's punishing him. Job and his friends argue for so long and so intensely that eventually even Job can't take it anymore. And he demands that God come down and explain himself in person. And God does. He appears in the form of a great storm cloud. But being God, of course, he doesn't offer the most direct of answers. Instead, he shows Job a vision of the vastness of the universe. He shows him the massive oceans and all of the planets and constellations. He shows him the seasons, the rains and snows, and the gates of death and darkness. And then he asks Job, could he ever understand all of this, let alone judge it? Overwhelmed, Job admits he cannot. Then, at the end of this vision, God shows Job 2 mighty vicious beasts. And he says that, as frightening as the beasts are, they aren't evil. They're all simply part of God's just, fundamentally good world. Job then says that he is unworthy, and knows not how to reply. So then God says it's all good now. He knows that Job is just a tiny finite thing, and that he did his best. But then God turns to Job's friends, and in a masterstroke of deflection, says that he was very disappointed in them for presuming to understand him and his ways. So he orders them to sacrifice rams and bulls in penance, and says that Job must pray for them so they not be punished. And Job and his friends all agree. In the end, God gave Job new gifts to replace everything that Satan had taken away. Twice as many camels, donkeys, oxen, and sheep, twice as many years to live his life, and even a shiny brand new family. And Job lived his new, double long life, happily ever after, now confident that mortals were not meant to know the fabric of God's plans, or why sometimes bad things happen to good people. And as for God and Satan, it was just kind of another Tuesday. And in the end, they both got what they wanted. Legendary thanks to Ahmed Ziad Turk, Alicia Bramble, Casey Mustia, Dominic Valenciana, Gunnar Clovis, Kyle Murgatroyd, and O'Reels1 for helping to make this show possible.